Welcome to the podcast hosted by timecam.com on how to stay on top of your work.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the series of podcasts, Stay on Top of Your Work. And this is Kate, and today my guest is Mark Sanborn. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hi, Kate. I'm great.
So, Mark is internationally known leadership keynote speaker and an international authority on leadership in business, team building, and change. You're also the author of 7 best-selling books that have topped the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and many more. And we can also watch your videos featuring you, as well as listen to you in numerous audio training programs. So if you feel like you want to become a leader, then you're in the right place. Mark, thank you very much for coming here today. I'm really happy that you are my guest.
My pleasure.
So to begin with, you're a certified speaking professional. And I'd like to ask you, what topics do you usually speak on, and how do you motivate your audience to pursue their goals to become a leader?
My primary expertise is in leadership development. I work with leaders at every level to turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. Over the last 31 plus years, I've written on all those areas that you mentioned: leadership, change, team building, customer service. But the 2 books that I'm most well known for, the first is called The Fred Factor: How Passion in Your Work and Life Can Turn the Ordinary into the Extraordinary. And that's the book that's been an international bestseller and kind of established me as a customer service expert, but I think even more importantly, as someone who understands how you can add value and grow your value proposition without necessarily spending a lot of money to do it. Then I wrote a book called You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader. Now, most of my clients are titled leaders. However, having a title isn't what makes them a leader. It's the skill set that makes them a leader. And so I talk to people about how to develop leadership skills so they can lead and make a positive difference at whatever level they're at and whether or not they have a title.
Okay, so when thinking about your speeches, but also in your experience, what advice can you give to people entering the harsh world of project management who want to be leaders?
I think as a leader, you're evaluated the same way as you are in project management. And the first is on the results that you're able to achieve, sticking to a timeline, under-promising, over-delivering, coming in on time, if not early. So results are important. But as a leader, you've got to remember that how you create those results is just as important. If you burn people out, if you destroy relationships, if you alienate vendors, then even though you might have gotten the results you desired, it's a short-term victory, because the next time you try to do a successful project, you'll find you're going to be facing resentment and pushback. So I always tell leaders that the toughest part is balancing the need to get results with the need to maintain and build positive relationships.
Mm-hmm. So what are the main features that a good leader should have, according to you?
Well, I've observed leaders. My goal is to report on what I've observed and the research that I've read. And I think that, what I just spoke to, what you might call competence in results and also competence in relationship building, also known as emotional intelligence. I think those are the 2. But I think once you get past that, it's really about the allocation of the only 3 resources any leader ever has: their time, their expertise, and the time and expertise of their team. So if you don't come from a point of clarity about what you're trying to achieve, you won't be able to focus people on the best way to deploy their time and expertise. And so I think leaders are a lot like a conductor of a symphony. A conductor doesn't play an instrument, and yet his or her role is very important because they do 2 things. They make sure that everyone is playing at the same time from the right music and that they're playing to the best of their ability. And I think that's what leaders do. They make sure that the right people are playing the right music at the right time and that they're doing it to the best of their ability.
Okay. So your speeches are very inspirational, and I'd like to ask you, do you think that these rules of a leader, we can apply them to our life? Like, can we be leaders in our life, in our personal work? Do you think it works somehow or not really?
No, I do. I believe that truth is transferable, that a principle is true. The only thing that changes is how you apply it. I think that all leadership in an organization begins with self-leadership, or what I call in one of my books, self-mastery. Because if you can't lead yourself, if you can't take responsibility for yourself, other people are going to be very resistant to follow you. So it's about being competent in the way you live your life and the way that you take responsibility for your own life. And then it's about expanding that into the roles that you have as a parent, or as a spouse, or as a church or a synagogue member, a community leader. But the principles are the same. It's just how we apply the principle, the context that we work in.
Okay, that's great. You have also a video series called Team Building, How to Motivate and Manage People, which made it to the #2 spot for best-selling educational video series in the US. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
How does a good leader motivates and manages people in a team?
There are a lot of things that a good leader does, but I think first and foremost, they remember that motivation is not just important for the individual as a unique member of the team, but for the team as a whole. For instance, if you motivate an individual, they might be motivated to achieve what they know will get them recognition and success, but they may or may not be motivated to cooperate or collaborate with other team members. So I believe that a good leader motivates both the individual and the team. They reward individuals for their contributions, but they also set goals for the team so that everyone has a reason to work together and not just to pursue their own selfish agenda. The research is pretty clear that the number one reason why any team fails is because an individual or a subgroup of the team puts their needs above what's best for the team. So you've got to be able to meet individual and team needs at the same time, or else all you have is a group of people really working rather independently of each other.
Mm-hmm. Or do you think maybe it's important to keep a certain balance in this?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I think you've got to, you've got two dials on your dashboard, the individuals who are contributing as well as the team's results. And I think that getting people to be part of a group is easy, but I think getting them to work together as a team is very challenging.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. So let's talk about your books. This is a really interesting topic to me because I'm a bookworm. I love books, and you have few positions which are really interesting. So you're the author of many publications, and your newest book, The Potential Principle, is out.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell us, like in short, what is the book about and what inspired you to write it?
Well, I'll start with what inspired me to write it. Most of my clients that engage me, that bring me in to speak or advise, are already very successful at what they do. There's an old saying that the people that most need to hear the sermon often don't go to church. Well, the companies that can most benefit from outside expertise and resources either aren't willing to invest in it or they don't have the resources. So what I found is that when I worked with successful individuals and successful companies, I found that there was something harder than becoming successful or becoming the best at what you did, and that was becoming the best at what you did and then continuing to get better. Because when you're number one in your market or you're number one in your organization, there's nobody else to emulate. There's nobody else to follow. You have to come up with some innovative strategies of your own to keep getting better. So I wrote the book to give people a template, and I based the book on the premise that better always beats best. So no matter how good you are, you can always become better. I don't think any of us have ever fully maximized our potential. And so the book focuses on 4 areas where you should be getting better, and then 4 very specific ideas you can use to achieve improvement in whatever area of your personal, professional life that you choose.
Okay, and what are these 4 areas in the book? Can you elaborate
I
on
talk
that?
about the potential matrix. I talk about thinking, performing, learning, and reflecting. And those 4 areas can leverage each other. Very often in business, we focus mostly on the performance area. But very often, if we think and plan better, or we learn or improve our skills, or we're able to reflect on lessons and insights, then our performance benefits. So I'll tell people that we tend to stick in an area that we're most comfortable with. But what we need to do is continue to get better in all 4 of those areas: thinking, learning, performing, and reflecting.
So when it comes to publications, do you have any particular inspiration that helps you in writing? And what books do you read?
Well, I've read thousands of books. I try to read 50 books a year and skim another 50 to 100. And what I find is over time, you have to dig deep to get beyond basic ideas. When I'm actually writing, I stop reading books that are similar to mine because I don't want to inadvertently be overly influenced or borrow an idea and not realize that I'm doing that. But really what inspires me is that the longer I've lived and even the more successful I've become, the more I've realized there is to learn. It's a big world. There are a lot of interesting topics. There is so much new research and so much change that technology is enabling that I don't ever feel like I've fully tapped out what I can write about that will benefit not just others as readers, but that will benefit me as an author.
Okay. So the last question I have to you. Our podcast is titled Stay on Top of Your Work. How do you stay on top of work? Do you have any practices or any other rules that you use to stay on top of your work?
You bet. There are two really important guidelines I use. And the first is, I always tell leaders, never confuse activity with accomplishment. It's not about how busy you are each day. It's about what you're able to achieve. And I say that activity is often the anesthesia of the ineffective leader. That is to say that some leaders just keep really busy, but they don't realize they're either focusing on the wrong thing or they're not achieving much. So each day, I think it's important to have 2 or 3 significant accomplishments that you have outlined for the day, so that you have a couple of things, maybe 3 things that if you achieve those things, it will demonstrate that you've accomplished something significant and it'll move you closer to whatever your long-term goals or vision might be. So I always say, be clear not just on your to-do list. To-do lists are fun, but what's important is that you end the day feeling like you've accomplished something of significance.
I'm really happy I could talk to you. It was my pleasure, my honor.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. And you can find more information about Mark in the description of this podcast. Make sure to check it out and stay updated to the latest news from Mark. And also you can get in touch with him to schedule a speech. So this podcast is brought to you by Time Camp. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, and even if you didn't, follow the links to our previous podcast. Stay tuned for more. Have a productive day. And until next time, thank you all for listening and bye-bye.
This podcast was brought to you by Time Camp. You can listen to it on iTunes and SoundCloud. Subscribe to get more content and always stay on top of your work.